Welcome to Cricket World TV, our final Ashes hotspot of the summer, with me, John Pennington, and Rob Johnston. Hello, Rob.
Evening, John.
Now, we've talked so much about this series being, defying predictions almost, and I think I predicted an England win at the Oval, and Australia went on to win by an innings. So, Rob, we've got to start really by looking back at that game. Maybe a game too far for England, perhaps, but just give us your assessment of what happened down in London.
Yes, I think that's right. I think despite all the talk from England before the game about them being really up for it and wanting to finish the season and the summer on a high in Test matches, I think perhaps the emotional drain really of the previous game at Trent Bridge, winning the Ashes, perhaps a bit unexpectedly, took their toll. So they looked a bit flat at the Oval, really. The bowlers were a bit down on pace, energy perhaps in the field wasn't quite what it had been previously in the series. So I think it was a game too far. Also, Australia, they did have a lot of motivation with Michael Clarke and Chris Rogers retiring. So I think they were obviously quite up for the game and wanting to make sure they didn't end the series on a poor note. So I think it was a game too far for England. But really, they'd done their job. They'd won the series and regained the Ashes. So we can't quibble too much.
And I guess it was another case of Australia, or whichever team would go on and won each test, getting ahead early, and that was almost it. Only really at Cardiff, where England were 30-odd for 3, did a team really come back from adversity. It was maybe one of the themes of the series. People are calling it a remarkable series. You talked about topsy-turvy. Any other sort of words and phrases you might use to sum this one up?
Yeah, I think you're spot on. I mean, there's been a lot of talk throughout the summer in articles I've read and watching the coverage and listening to the coverage, the momentum swings and the roller coaster that the series has been. So, and it's been like that in previous Ashes series. I think we've mentioned that in previous hotspots. Once a team gets on top, it's very difficult for the other team to get back. And I'm not quite sure the reason why. Perhaps a bit of Test match batting. Technique-wise and mentality has gone out of the game a little bit. So, teams, when they do lose a few wickets, are always attacking. Throughout this summer, we've seen that even with England. If you cast your mind back to the first Test match against New Zealand, I think they were 4 for 40 at Lords, and Joe Root and Ben Stokes came out and blazed away. Now, that comes off sometimes, but, a lot of the times it doesn't. So perhaps that sort of shift has had an impact. But, yeah, I mean, it's been a very, very strange series. And I think, as I mentioned in my review of the series, it's very rare that you get a side winning a series, but also being thumped, really, in 2 of the Test matches. So it's quite a strange dynamic.
It certainly has been, and I want to pick up on a couple of points you make in your review, Rob. How important has it been for England to, in a way, win back public support after a winter or 2 of discontent, if you like?
Yeah, very, very important. I was actually in Barbados for the 3rd Test match of the West Indies tour when England collapsed, really, and threw away that Test match. So they drew 1-1 against a mediocre West Indies side. Recriminations after that series, giving England really no hope of competing against Australia and New Zealand. Then we came back and Peter Moores was obviously sacked as head coach. Andrew Strauss came in and confirmed that Kevin Peterson wouldn't play despite him scoring a 100 for Surrey. So then the recriminations were on social media were very negative about England, not giving them a chance. A lot of people in the media, their opinions were polarised on the Peterson issue. But now there's no mention of Kevin Peterson. There's no mention of his absence. There's no mention of previous games. The attitude very much is the here and now, and I think that's been good. And England have reconnected with the public. Everyone's talking about this new vibrant style of play they're playing. So I think that's been really important, and it's been great to see, actually.
Yeah, it certainly has. Another thing that's been great to see, certainly for me, is that the series has been played in a really good spirit. There was a little bit of almost pre-niggle, if you like, before the series. We sort of thought, well, after having such a wonderful series against New Zealand that's played in the right spirit, we wondered whether the Ashes would see the same. But it did, and I think that was good for the game as well, wasn't it?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, the cynic in me might say that because Australia were losing, they actually didn't have too much to say. But I think that's quite cynical. But yeah, it was played in a good spirit. And I think in the last Test match at the Oval, the respect that Alistair Cook gave Michael Clarke when he came out to bat for the potentially the last time in the game, and indeed it worked out that way, was good to see. After the games, the teams have been very respectful about the opposition and their performances. So I think it's been played in a good spirit, and that was the case against in the New Zealand series. And yeah, it was good to see. We don't want to see some of the scenes we had in the last Ashes series. So yeah, it was fantastic.
Yeah, they're all setting a good example, which is what we want to see. Now, what about the individual players, Rob? Whose stock do you think has really risen in this series, and whose stock has maybe fallen quite away?
Well, I think for England, obviously Joe Root was man of the series, and his stock probably didn't go through the roof, but just stayed where it was as one of the premier batsmen in the world. He confirmed that really. I think also for England, Cook has his captaincy has shown a very different side to one that the public has seen before. So for him to out captain Michael Clarke in many of the games was really quite a change from what we previously seen. So I think his captaincy stock has risen, and then the likes of Ben Stokes and Mark Wood, who have made impressions at different times. Stephen Finn obviously as well. For Australia, I think Stephen Smith actually sort of come out even at the end of the series, scoring that important 100 at the Oval. David Warner has been elevated to the vice captaincy. So his stock has risen on the back of a decent series. But I think really the main one for me would be, Australia's middle order has really been decimated from where it was. The likes of Haddin and Watson obviously dropped. Sean Marsh came into the side, did very poorly, and was straight out again. So there are some players there in the middle order for Australia who might be need to be doing some work to get back in the side.
Yeah, and just a quick word on England, maybe, Rob. Ian Bell, a lot of talk about his future at the moment. I think he sort of came out immediately after the game and he said he might think about it. What do you reckon? Should he carry on? Is there still place for him in that middle order?
I think England need him in the middle order at the moment. I think they've got 2 tough tours coming up, and if you take Bell out of that batting lineup, really Cook is the most experienced player in there, and you'll be relying on a lot of inexperienced players. Even Joe Root, who's played a lot of games for England, is still relatively young and inexperienced. So I think Bell needs to stay. I think England need him to stay, and I don't see many players queuing up to take his position. We've still got an issue around the opening berth with Alistair Cook. That needs to be resolved. So if you were to have 2 new players into the side opening and then one at potentially number 3, that's a big upheaval. So I think Cook will be wanting Bell to stay maybe for another year, just to let the bed down a little bit more.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely spot on, Rob. Had maybe Cook and Knight really had a solid series, you might think there was more of a case, but yeah, it would result in too much change for me as well. What about highlights of the series in years to come when people say to you, 2015 Ashes? What maybe 1 or 2 things are going to spring into your mind as real highlights? Do you think?
Well, I think quite obviously the spell of Stuart Broad at Trent Bridge, 8 for 15. That first hour of the 4th Test match decided the series and will go down as one of the greatest spells in Ashes history, I think. But I was also slightly, maybe strangely, Stephen Finn's spell at Edgbaston when he took 6 wickets. I think from a game perspective, that was obviously very important, but also for Finn to come roaring back like that into the side was really, really great to see and a good thing for England. So they're the two moments that stick out for me. And obviously Brad Haddin's drop at Cardiff, which if he had caught that, might have been he could have had a very different feel about it this Ashes series. So just some of those memories. But it was a great series full of brilliant innings and great bowling display. So it was really great to watch.
Certainly was, and I'd also throw in Ben Stokes' catch in there at the wonderful catch that he took diving away to his right, which sort of inspired the lot of social media buzz with everyone sort of doing the Stuart Broad face, if you like. So that was maybe one that, a little bit like Andrew Strauss's catch back in 2005. We'll see portraits of that in the future, I'm sure. Well, that's just about the end of our Ashes chat, Rob, but I do want to just quickly touch on the limited overs leg of the tour that finishes everything off. Both Australia and England are going to be trying out a few new combinations, a few new players maybe. What do you reckon of the ODIs? Australia obviously world champions, but England, we saw how well they did against New Zealand. Any thoughts ahead of this one?
Yeah, it's going to be another tough test for England, even though Australia are missing quite a few players from that World Cup winning team. Obviously, Brad Haddin and Michael Clarke have retired, and Mitchell Johnson's being rested. But it's, you know, they're playing Ireland today, and I see that debutant Joe Burns kicked off their innings in some style today. So it's going to be a tough series for England. But I think the most important thing, win or lose this series, England need to just continue the way they were playing against New Zealand, this aggressive style with the bat in particular, you know, teeing off, really taking the game to Australia. I think that's what the public expect now. Not necessarily expecting England to win every game, but they're expecting them to try and play with some style and panache, and it's not always going to come off. But I think from England's point of view, that will be the key thing to get out of this series, keeping that style of cricket and keep backing the younger players they've got. And, you know, it should be interesting because I think, you know, both teams might be a little bit more evenly matched than perhaps they would be if they were both at full strength.
Yeah, it could be competitive. Who knows? Could be another 3-2.
Yes, yeah, I think you know, I think I can see both sides winning a couple of games, and you know, hopefully, just like the New Zealand series, it will come down to the last one, and you know, that'll be a really great end to the summer.
That would be superb, and no doubt if that happens, we'd do a hotspot to have a look back. Rob, it's been an absolute pleasure once again. Thank you for your insight today and over the Ashes. Hope you've enjoyed being with us.
Yeah, it's been great. Thanks, John.
And thank you very much for watching us here on Cricket World TV, but goodbye for now.